How's everybody doing? Great to be learning with you on a Wednesday, Yom Revi'i. Let's light up the darkness. Who's in the house? Yehud in South Carolina, Joe in the Inland Empire, Sharon in New Jersey, Karen in Northern California, Melissa in Great Neck, Lucy in Minnesota, Bell in Texas, Shandora in Atlanta, Lorraine in Texas, Tom in PA, Bella in Florida, Chaim in Florida, Ella in Southern California, Frank in San Pedro, Marjorie in Georgia, Michelle in Washington. First, let's just pray that everyone in the path or near the path of the hurricane be safe. And we say Amen. Right. So God was very kind to me tonight. Normally I come here, I prepare for the class, I read the page, and then I turn on the dedicated iPhone that I use. It's not my regular phone, just the one I use only to run the software of the streaming software for the class. And if I had done that like normal, would have had a problem. Because for whatever reason, the phone which I plug in after class every time, and I did plug in yesterday, didn't charge. But I happened to, just get it turned on early today and saw that. And, I only just keep it on my desk. This is the only purpose that it serves. Why didn't it charge? I got in there with the toothpick. These iPhones, you plug in the charger every day, and little bits of dust settle on the charger and then go in there. And sometimes that gets in between the contacts of the charger and the charging port on the phone. And so when I started picking at it with a toothpick and then with a little brush that I used to clean between teeth, and like this big, dust ball came out of there. And then it started charging again. Before that, it wouldn't charge. So hopefully that's all that was up with it. But I was able to get online, and the phone seems to be operating. So thank you, God, that I checked it early. And I'm not praying every time that we have no connection issues. And I'll stop boring you with my technical problems. Okay. Our daf today is page 110 here in Tractate Bava Basra. Continue our discussion of Mishna number 1 here in chapter 8. And we picked it up at the bottom of page 109b. In connection with the story of Jonathan, and this is not the Jonathan who was the son of King Saul and the close friend of King David. Different Jonathan. So in connection with the story of Jonathan, the son of Menashe, the Gemara cites a related statement. Okay, and this story we encountered it toward the end of yesterday's class. I reviewed it a little bit today. It's in Judges chapter 17. And as it introduced, it comes right after the story of Samson. And as it says so often in the book of Judges, this was in the days before there was a king over Israel, when every man did what was right in his eyes, right? There was no king to make sure that the law was the Torah, but that the law was applied and enforced throughout the land. And so you had this character, Micah, who recruited a young Levite, and as we saw yesterday, it might not mean that he was really a Levite. Maybe he was from the tribe of Judah. Maybe he was a guy named Levi. A little bit unclear. The sages were arguing about it. To be a priest in the temple that he set up, by his own house, right? This was in the days when the tabernacle, the Mishkan, was in the city of Shiloh, but this fellow Micah set up his own temple with his own statue. So it seems like he was dedicated to God, but it was like a golden calf type of situation. And so he recruited this Levite to act as his priest. And then these Danites come along and say, well, what do you want to be a priest in this guy's personal temple? You can come be a priest for the whole tribe of Dan. and that led to further trouble. Certainly the point was that even if they were dedicated to the one God, they were doing unauthorized practices bordering on or equivalent to avodah zarah, which is to say idolatry. So this was a very negative incident. Okay. So in connection with this fellow, Jonathan, the Levite, who was the son of Menashe, and as we learned yesterday, associated with Menashe, a big sinner. So the Gemara cites a related statement. Rabbi Elazar says, a person should always cleave to good people. Now, you can stop right there. That's a great principle. Surround yourself with righteous people, and your behavior will be more righteous. You will be elevated. Surround yourself with the riffraff, ruffians, criminal element, and your behavior will follow. I'm a little modest. Okay. So a person should always cleave to good people. Meaning here, as elucidated by Rav Steinsaltz, this means here that one should marry a woman from a good family. Torah scholars speaking to each other and saying, make sure you marry a woman from a good family, as this is beneficial for the offspring of that marriage. As in the case of Moses, right? Moshe Rabbeinu, the great prophet Moses, who married a daughter of Yitro, in English Jethro. Now Jethro, Yitro, right? He has a Torah portion named after him, the one in which the Ten Commandments are given. It's a little bit surprising, right? The Torah portion in which the Ten Commandments are given is the one named after a non-Jew. It's not the only one named after a non-Jew. But Yitro, who was a Midianite priest, was understood to be a very righteous person who, was certainly a Judeophile, right? A lover of the Jews. If perhaps he converted to Judaism later. But at any rate, it says that Moses, who married a daughter of Yitro, who was a priest of idolatry, Jonathan, who was also a priest of idolatry in this incident in the book of Judges, descended from him. He was a descendant of Moses. Right? You'd think that's really good yichus, right? A really, prominent lineage to be a descendant of Moses. And yet, because Moses married the daughter of a priest of idolatry, he ended up having a descendant who was a priest of idolatry. Whereas Moses' brother Aaron, the first high priest, who married the daughter of Aminidav, who was a descendant of Judah, and Aminidav, who was of distinguished lineage in the tribe of Judah, he merited to have Pinchas descended from him. Pinchas ended up, who was a grandson of Aaron, and in that story that's in the Torah about when there was a tremendous sin among the Jewish people from the tribe of Shimon. There was this, these people having sex, Cosby and Zimri, right in the middle of the camp, where the woman was, there to seduce Jews to go worship idols with her, and God was furious and unleashed a plague on the Jewish people, and it was this guy Pinchas who zealously guarded the honor of the Jewish people and killed this couple who was fornicating for idolatrous purposes in the camp, and that stemmed the plague. Now, Pinchas was very zealous, and so you might ask, did he really do the right thing? Maybe he just should have separated them, or punished them, but killing them in that moment, was that really right? And it is a question, but God's self answered the question by awarding to Pinchas the covenant of the priesthood, which until that point, it was not guaranteed to go to him, even though he was a descendant of Aaron. God said, yes, you will have the covenant of the priesthood, and my covenant of peace is with you. Okay, so Pinchas is understood to be a very holy and righteous Jew. So the comparison that's being made is a descendant of Moses ended up being a priest of idolatry, whereas a descendant of Aaron was the great and holy Pinchas. And why? Because Moses married a wife who was the daughter of a priest of idolatry. So the Gemara asks, but didn't Pinchas also come from Yitro? But it is written, and Elazar, the son of Aaron, who's the father of Pinchas, and Elazar, the son of Aaron, took one of the daughters of Putiel as a wife, and she bore him Pinchas. We learned that at Exodus 6:25. And what? Is it not stating that Pinchas came from the family of Yitro, who was also called Putiel, because he fattened calves for idol worship. So the Gemara answers, no, that's not why he's called Putiel. In fact, what the Torah is stating is that Elazar married a wife who came from Joseph, one of the 12 brothers, the great Joseph, who became the Grand Vizier in Egypt, right, and saved the Jewish people from that famine. Joseph, and why would Joseph be, why would a descendant of Joseph be called Putiel, or why would Joseph himself be called Putiel? Because Joseph battled Shepitpet, right, similar word, with his desire when he resisted the advances of Potiphar's wife. So the Gemara asks, but didn't the tribes denigrate him, Pinchas, after he killed Zimri in Numbers chapter 25? And they would say of him, have you seen this son of Puti, the son of he whose mother's father fattened calves for idol worship? Should such a man kill a prince of the tribe of Israel? So this Zimri, who was involved, with this woman Cosby, who seduced him for idolatry, but he happened to be a prince of the tribe of Shimon. So who was this Pinchas, who himself is descended from somebody who fattened calves? And why would that be? Because Elazar took a daughter from Yitro. So therefore isn't Pinchas also descended from Yitro? Now we're on page 110a. So rather, this is how the matter should be resolved. If his mother's father came from the family of Yosef, his mother's mother came from the family of Yitro, or if his mother's father came from the family of Yitro, then his mother's mother came from the family of Yosef. So, while his mother was descended from Yosef on one side and from Yitro on the other, Pinchas was a more distant relative to Yitro than Jonathan was. Based on this conclusion, the language of the verse is also precise, as it is written, and Elazar, Aaron's son, took one of the daughters of Putiel, and conclude from the wording of the verse that Pinchas was descended from two men who were referred to as Puti, Yitro and Yosef. But at any rate, what they're trying to say is, as attenuated as it may be, we're learning out from this that if you're going to marry a woman, try to marry a woman from a distinguished family. Right, so here is the note in the Koran. It is fitting for a man to marry a woman from a good family. This is why the sages say in Tractate Pesachim 49b, a person should always be willing to sell all that he owns in order to marry the daughter of a Torah scholar. If he cannot find the daughter of a Torah scholar, he should marry the daughter of one of the great people of the generation who are pious, although they are not Torah scholars. If he cannot find the daughter of one of the great people of the generation, he should marry the daughter of one of the heads of the congregation. If he cannot find the daughter of one of the heads of the congregation, he should marry the daughter of one of the charity collectors. If he cannot find the daughter of one of the charity collectors, he should marry the daughter of one of the school teachers. But in any case, he should not marry the daughter of an Am Haaretz, an ignoramus, one who knows nothing about Torah law. And one should not marry his daughter off to an ignoramus unless the ignoramus is punctilious in his performance of mitzvahs. So maybe he doesn't know Torah, but he's attached to God. Okay, so that's not so bad. But at any rate, when you go out seeking a wife, right, you're not looking necessarily, these things are important, but above beauty, is personality. And above personality is piety. And above piety is that she comes from a good family, because these are likely qualities that are going to be, it was in her nurture, and they should be both by nature and nurture passed on to the children. And they're giving this advice to Torah scholars, or to people who are at least learning Talmud. So presumably these are qualities that are important to this guy who's looking for a wife. So he should be very, considered an important quality among the other qualities he's looking for, that she comes from a learned and pious family. Rava says, one who marries a woman needs to first examine her brothers, so that he will know in advance what character his children will have. As it is stated, and Aaron, Moses' brother, took Elisheva, the daughter of Aminidav, the sister of Nachson. That's Exodus 6:23. By inference from that which is stated, the daughter of Aminidav, do I not know that she is the sister of Nachson? Right, Nachson ben Aminidav famously was a prince of the tribe of Judah. And when the children of Israel had come out of Egypt and were encamped right by the sea, and here comes Pharaoh and all his chariots, and the people start to panic, and Moses beseeches God, save us. And God says, what are you praying to me for? Lift your arm and the sea will part, right? And Moses lifted his arm, and the sea did not part until one of the Jews waded into the ocean with tremendous emunah, with great faith, that God would save them, and that Moses' hand at God's command would result in the sea's parting. But the sea didn't part until that first Jew walked into the water up to his nose. And who was that Jew? Nachson, Aminidav, ben Aminidav, right? The son of Aminidav. So, if you're taking a daughter of Aminidav, we know she's the sister of this Nachson. Why does the Torah say both? She's a daughter of Aminidav and a sister of Nachson. Do I not know that she's the sister of Nachson? What is the meaning when the verse states the sister of Nachson? From here one learns that one who marries a woman needs to examine her brothers. The reason is, as the sages taught, most sons resemble the mother's brothers. In connection with the Gemara's mention of Jonathan from the book of Judges, who served as a priest for Micah, the Gemara quotes additional statements from the sages concerning that episode, describing when the men from the tribe of Dan passed through Micah's house, right, to sort of hire away his personal priest. The verse states, and they turned aside there and said to him, who brought you here, Halom, and what are you doing, and what are you doing in this place, and what do you have here, Po? So they asked him three questions, right? Who brought you here? What are you doing in this place? And what do you have here? That's Judges 18, verse 3. So the sages interpret their multiple questions. They said to this young Levite, do you not come from Moses, about whom it is written, do not draw close to here, Halom, in Exodus 3:5? And do you not come from Moses, about whom it is written, what, is that in your hand? In Exodus 4:2, and do you not come from Moses, about whom it is written, but as for you, stand here, Po, with me? These are all allusions to the fact that this young guy who's acting as an idolatrous priest, or at least, priest and doing questionable practices, even if it's in the name of the one God, but with building a statue and serving, with a homemade Hoshen and Mishpat, the accoutrement of the high priest, who at that time was serving in Shiloh. And this guy Micah sort of made up his own, statue, temple, and adornments for his personal priest. When they find this guy, this descendant of Moses, what they're saying to him is, you're a descendant of Moses. What are you doing acting in this way? Shall you, a descendant of our teacher Moses, become a priest for idol worship? And this guy Jonathan said to them, this is the tradition that I received from the house of my father's father. A person should always hire himself out to idol worship rather than require the help of people by receiving charity. And I took this position in order to avoid having to take charity. That's the tradition you received from descendants, your ancestors were the descendants of Moses, our teacher? What? And the Gemara comments, and he, Jonathan, thought that this referred to actual idol worship. But that is not so. That was not the intent of the tradition. Rather, here the term idol worship, which literally, avodah zarah, is strange service, is referring to service, meaning labor, that is strange. Not a strange service, meaning serving strange gods, but rather a service that is strange to you. Meaning, in other words, one should be willing to perform labor that is difficult and humiliating in his own eyes rather than become a recipient of charity. As Rav said to Rav Kahana, his student, skin a carcass in the market and take payment, but do not say, I am a great man and this matter is beneath me. Right? If you're broke, take a job that maybe you think it's smelly, maybe you think it's beneath your rank in society, but better you should have employment than take charity. The Gemara continues its discussion of that episode. Later, when King David saw that money was excessively precious to Jonathan. Now that's weird. What? Now we're talking about a different Jonathan, right? We're talking about Jonathan, the son of Saul, who was in the King David story. But why is this being mentioned here, which was generations before? Very strange. Later, when King David saw that money was excessively precious to Jonathan, he appointed him as director of the treasuries of the temple. As it is stated, and Shebuel, the son of Gershom, right? So not the son of King Shaul, and Shebuel, the son of Gershom, the son of Moses, was ruler over the treasuries. And the Gemara asks, and was his name really Shebuel? What wasn't his name Jonathan? And Rabbi Yochanan says he is called Shebuel in order to allude to the fact that he repented and he returned to God, Shav La'el, with all his heart. So in terms of the seeming, what's that called? What's that word? I learned it in Shakespeare class when something is out of time. I don't remember. Somebody will put it in the comments for me. Anachronism. So the sages don't explain this anachronism, and therefore we're going to move on. The Mishna teaches back to who inherits from who, right? That fathers inherit from their sons and sons inherit from their fathers. The Mishnah teaches in the list of those who inherit from and bequeath to each other, sons with regard to their father. And the Gemara asks, from where do we derive this law that sons inherit the entire estate and daughters do not receive a share along with them? As it is written, if a man dies and has no son, you shall pass his inheritance to his daughter. So that's Numbers 27:8. And the reason the inheritance would be passed to a daughter is that he has no son. But if he has a son, the son takes precedence. Rav Papa said to Abaye, why not say the following? If there is only a son, let the son inherit the father's estate. If there is only a daughter, let the daughter inherit the father's estate. And if there is both a son and a daughter, so neither one should inherit. Neither this one should inherit, nor that one should inherit. Abaye asked Rav Papa, and rather, who should then inherit? Is that to say that the ruler of the city should inherit? And Rav Papa said to him, this is what I meant to say. If there is a son and a daughter, this one should not inherit all of the estate, and that one should not inherit all of the estate, but they should inherit in equal portions. In other words, if there's only a son and a daughter, they should split it. Why should we say that the son has precedence over the daughter? And Abaye said to him, and we're on page 110b now, but is the verse necessary in order to teach us that when he has only one child, that child should inherit all of his property? If you say that the right of the son and daughter to the inheritance is equal, then the verse, if a man dies and has no son, which teaches that when there is no son, his daughter inherits, is superfluous. Rav Papa responded, yeah, well, and perhaps this verse teaches us the following, that a daughter is also subject to receiving inheritance. And the Gemara replies, no, the verse does not need to teach this, since that law is derived from the verse, and every daughter who possesses an inheritance, from Numbers 36:8, which clearly states that a daughter is subject to receiving inheritance. So Rav Acha bar Yaakov said, the law that a son inherits his father's estate and precedes a daughter is derived from here in the passage in the Torah where the daughters of Tzlofachad request their father's inheritance in the land of Israel. They said to Moses, why should the name of our father be done away from among his family because he has no son? From Numbers 27 verse 4. So Rabbi Acha ben Yaakov infers the reason they requested the inheritance is that, as they said, her father or their father had no son. So one can infer, but if he has a son, the son would take precedence and the daughters would not have requested an inheritance. Now the Gemara raises a difficulty. But perhaps it was the daughters of Tzlofachad who said this, i.e. that they were entitled to an inheritance only because their father had no son. They thought that this was the law based on the custom of that time. But after God spoke to Moses, the Torah was given, and a halacha, a Torah law was initiated that a daughter's right to inherit is equal to that of the son. Right? How do we know that now that daughters inherit, they don't inherit equally alongside their brothers? And the Gemara accepts this difficulty and states, rather, it is clear that the source for the law is, as we answered initially, as Abaye derived from the verse, if a man dies and has no son, then you shall pass his inheritance to his daughter. But if he has a son, even if he has a son and a daughter, the son inherits. The daughter has a right to be taken care of, but in this paternal patriarchal system, she doesn't inherit if there is a son. She only inherits if there's not a son. Now, all of this is in the absence of a will, right? It's a patriarchal system, but a father can pass on his estate to his children as he wishes, as I mentioned yesterday, and we know that for sure from even in modern times that a secular will is valid halachically from a ruling of Rabbi Moshe Feinstein. Now, Ravina said the source for the halacha that a son precedes a daughter is from here. Who is next to him? Hakarov Elah from Numbers 27:11, teaching that the closer Karov one is to the deceased, the earlier one is in the order of inheritance. And a son of the deceased is considered by Jewish law to be a closer relative to the father than the daughter. And the Gemara asks, and what demonstrates the closeness of a son more than that of a daughter? This is not emotionally speaking, we're just talking about legally. That a son stands in place of his father to designate a Hebrew maidservant as a wife for himself and with regard to an ancestral field. This was the derivation that we discussed yesterday. And the Gemara rejects this. This is not a valid proof, as designation cannot demonstrate that a son is a closer relative because a daughter is not subject to designation because she obviously cannot marry a Hebrew maidservant. And with regard to an ancestral field as well, the Tana established his ruling that a son is a closer relative than others from this same refutation. Remember, it was based on Yibum. Is there Yibum except in a case where there is no son? And this applies also where there is no daughter. So rather, it is clear that the source for this law is, as we answered initially. And if you wish, say instead that the law that a son precedes a daughter is derived from here in the passage in the Torah addressing the inheritance of slaves, which states, and you, these are non-Jewish slaves, and you may make them an inheritance for your sons after you, from Leviticus 25:46. And from this one can infer your sons, but not your daughters. So the Gemara asks, that is so. Then when the verse states that your days may be multiplied and the days of your sons, beneichem, in Deuteronomy 11:21, should one infer that this too means your sons but not your daughters? Is it not obvious that daughters are also worthy of receiving the blessing of longevity? So the Gemara answers, a blessing is different. In a verse that speaks of blessings, the term beneichem should be understood, sons, their sons, should be understood in its broader sense as your children, but in a verse that speaks of halacha, it is to be understood in the narrower sense of, literally your sons. Now, the Mishnah teaches And paternal brothers inherit from one another and bequeath to each other, right? So let's say that a man dies, his father's already passed away, he has no children, so his brothers will inherit. And paternal brothers inherit from one another, and they bequeath to each other. From where do we derive this law? Rab has said it is derived from a verbal analogy between the word brothers, stated with regard to inheritance, and the word brothers found in the verses concerning the sons of Jacob. When Jacob's sons speak to Joseph, they state, "We, your servants, are 12 brothers, the sons of one man in the land of Canaan." Right, so this is when they don't know that this is Joseph, the brother they sold into slavery, who is now the second most powerful man on earth, the grand vizier for Pharaoh, who's now distributing food to the people who come, starving people from the famine, seeking food. And it's Joseph who recognizes his brothers, but they don't recognize him. So just as there, in the verse concerning Jacob's sons, the word brothers is referring to paternal brothers and not maternal brothers, as the 12 of them shared only the same father, but they had different mothers. They had 4 different mothers. So too, here, where this term is used with regard to inheritance, the verse is referring to paternal brothers and not maternal brothers. I'm almost done. Questions or comments, please get them in now. The Gemara asks, but why do I need this proof from the verse concerning Jacob's sons? It is written in the passage concerning inheritance, "Then you shall give his inheritance to his kinsman, who is next to him of his family, and he shall inherit it." When the term family is used in the Bible, one's father's family is called one's family, while one's mother's family is not called one's family. Again, this is not an emotional statement. This is just a legalism, as it were. Hold on a second. Just getting ready to answer questions. And I had to log back into the Google Doc that Nina uses to pass me the questions, and hopefully it will load. Okay. Not maternal brothers. Okay. So, but why do I need this proof from the verse concerning Jacob's sons? It is written in the passage concerning inheritance, "Then you shall give his inheritance to his kinsman who is next to him of his family, and he shall inherit it." Numbers 27:11. And when the term family is used in the Bible, one's father's family is called one's family, while one's mother's family is not called one's family, so that in all matters of inheritance, it is the patrilineal relatives who are taken into account. And the Gemara answers, yes, it is indeed so that the verbal analogy is not needed to teach the law of inheritance. And when Rabba's explanation was stated, it was stated with regard to the matter of levirate marriage, yibum, teaching that yibum is performed only by a paternal brother, but not by a maternal brother, right? So if a man was married and he dies childless, and he also left a brother, that brother and his widow have the option to perform yibum, get married, and then their firstborn will be considered an heir of the brother who died without a child. But this obligation to either perform yibum or to perform chalitza instead of yibum only applies to a paternal brother. If there were half brothers with the same mother, different fathers, yibum is not in play. And that concludes our discussion for today. Let me take a couple of questions. Sharon, musical request. Is it possible to get the prayer Achenu in honor of hostages sung by your permitted musicians, such a powerful song and prayer to help bring them home? I love that request. Let me see if I can find exactly. Permitted meaning copyright issues. If I play music, that's not, that doesn't have a copyright issue for me. It's like even if I have the personal permission, but it's recording that's out there, I end up running into problems with YouTube and Facebook, for that warm-up music. But let me see what I can do, because I agree with you, Sharon. That's such a beautiful song. And when I spent a week in my son's yeshiva last January in Jerusalem, his Rosh Hashiva said that melody, that nigun, achenu, our brothers in Israel, meaning our family in Israel, wherever they may be situated, whether on land or sea, may God have compassion upon them and bring them from distress to relief, from darkness to light, from captivity to freedom. It may be done speedily and soon, and we say Amen. That's the Achenu prayer. And the melody for that has sort of become, like every war has its song, as it were, as Rabbini said. And this particular melody, the one you're talking about for Achenu, is sort of like the melody of this war, because it refers specifically to all the hostages that were taken or we apply it specifically to the hostages that were taken on October 7th. So I love that idea. Let me see what I can do. And Jonathan, I would also offer this. We are all descended from a mix of good and bad. Go back far enough and you will find both. So for you and me, as our lesson began, a person should always cling to the good. We should cling to the good in us and continue that behavior from our heritage. Absolutely, right? And this is not dispositive. There are many people who come from what you would call not a good family who are wonderful people. But it is not a bad idea to look for people who share your values. And one way you can know whether they share your values or not is, does their family share your values? And Tom says, we are influenced by our past, but still have free will. I would say exactly. That's what I've got for us today. And with God's help, we'll be together again tomorrow at the regular time, Thursday, 6 p.m. Pacific. Have a great night.